Hello, 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 coaches and leaders. I'm so excited to have Hunter on with me. So Hunter is an associate principal, which I find interesting. In my world, I interact with assistant principals. So like, I find, vice principal, right? Anyway, I love all these like names for similar, similar positions. Hunter, you have something really specific we're going to talk about. And what I love about this is that you implemented something at your school that dramatically impacted behavior management. And so
Mhm.
we're going to be talking about that systems thinking for behavior management. So I'm excited to kind of jump into this very specific topic. It's not broad, and I think everyone's going to get a lot out of this. Before we jump in though, I would just want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Becca. It is an absolute honor. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, so if you could just let everyone know where did you start in education and what do you do now?
Yeah, I started out as a seventh grade science teacher here in Des Moines, Iowa. I've been at the same school district since I began teaching, and luckily enough, I took the leap, as my mom would say, she's a former principal, to the dark side of administration. So I've been an associate principal at a pre-K through fourth grade elementary school in Des Moines, like I said, for the past 2 years now. Yeah, doing lots of work with behavior as an associate principal, so I'm excited to dig in.
Yes, was it I've heard APs are behavior buses and books.
Yes, a lot. Every single AP has a different, day-to-day job, and it's just amazing. They're just jacks of all trades. You go to one
Yes.
district, it looks one way, another school, it looks
Yes.
another way. So, to all the APs out there, you're not alone. You are crushing it.
I love that. That's so inspirational. Okay. So, so we are going to talk about a systems thinking approach to behavior management. So first, I'd love you to share with everyone what is systems thinking, and then I'd
Mm.
love to hear kind of like what did that look like at your school?
Yeah, we do so much lip service to this term of systems thinking.
Yes.
And really, a lot of my theory of knowledge comes from the work of W. Edwards Deming. If you don't know him, he's basically this incredible economist who um, took Japan out of the World War II era, turned their economy around with, he's got the Deming 14 points, right? But and you can Google those now, but listen first and then Google those later. So what I first started out with, Becca, was in my first year as an associate principal, was just an insane amount of behavior calls, behavior referrals. Our building just felt every single day like it was on fire. And so I had to rewind back to the teachings of W. Edwards Deming and think about what is my theory of knowledge, right? What is my theory that I can use to tackle this challenge, right? It's very basic in premise, but obviously when you dig into the system aspect of it, it's complex. And as I was sitting there in that for as my a first year assistant principal, associate principal, figuring out how do I manage all this behavior? How do I go from taking my walkie-talkie that was on call 24/7, and just for statistics sake, we had roughly, and I did the math, about 17 calls per day. Okay.
Whoa.
So how many times am I getting interrupted? How many observations do I have to cut short? How many times where I'm being taken away from instruction to go respond? That was a lot. And the feel of that is it's difficult to manage. And so I had that stopping point where I had to say, enough is enough. I have to rewind and go back to this system. Because another theory of systems thinking is that the system is designed to produce the result it is getting, right? I know that's a common understanding of systems thinking, but I had to have a hard reality check with myself of this is year one, there's no excuses. The system is producing these results, these 17 calls a day. The system we have in place is currently producing that. So what is my job in adjusting the system? And I know we were just talking before a little bit about you being a business owner and having that autonomy and that control to do things how you wanted to do. And so I had to sit down and say, how do I want this system to look? And so really the work of the past couple of years has been modifying and adjusting and adapting this system to not just take on behavior alone, right? Go beyond me and my walkie and how can I engage and collaborate with amazing educators in my building to take this on together.
Wow, I love that. I actually really do love you naming that the system is built to produce essentially what it's producing, right? And
Yeah.
to look at it as a system. So I know you said, as we know, and I think it's a great reminder. We either know it and we're reminded, but it's a great reminder. And I just want to kind of name that you stopped and you stepped back, right?
hmm
And I think for those listening that are feel like your whole day is putting out fires, right? You're just such a great example of stop and step back.
Yeah, there was a great meeting I had with one of our AEA representatives, and something that she talked about is this concept of capacity.
Hmm.
And for systems leaders, associate principals, principals, interventionists, whoever you are that are players in this system, you have to also be okay with a certain level of capacity. So when I looked at our MTSS triangle and I looked at the top, the high risk, right? When you go onto panorama for us and we look at the red high risk kids, man, it was high. It was not the percent that I wanted. But I had to be okay with a certain level of that. And I had to be very transparent with our staff and say, this is our current capacity given the staff that we have and given where we're at with our collective understanding of behavior interventions, function-based accommodations, interventions. And so part of that stepping back was deciding this is the current capacity that we're at. Okay. We're going to have to let that be. Now we're going to have to take steps forward to, as we know, build towards a better capacity. But I had to stop and get very clear as to what those steps would be.
I love this. Okay. So I'd love to hear what did you do?
Yeah. So the big thing for me it was expanding it beyond my office. Okay. So what I began was a really something common amongst so many educators and schools is tier two team, right?
Mhm.
Some schools might call it a behavior assistance team, some might call it MTSS team, whatever it is. The title doesn't really matter. But I got together a group of educators and I said, how can we take this system and make it better? One thing that Dr. Doug Stillwell, amazing educator, superintendent, had taught me was it's not truly a process until you get it on paper. And so we wrote it down. What is the process from step one at the tier one level? What do we expect all teachers to know and be able to do for students? And then basically create a flow chart. What would it look like for a tier one intervention to look like and work in a classroom? Okay. Has it been done with fidelity, right? Well, what does fidelity mean? Our staff trained on the nature of that. That was a conversation we had to have. Okay. So then the next step would be what defines a student being ready for tier two? We had to really get clear, right? When there were 17 calls a day, um, there's so many things you could choose to do. There are a lot of kids that need intervention, but where do you start? So we had to create some clear criteria for us as to what kids we were going to intervene with first and why. And then what we really did a lot of work around collectively with these teachers, I would get a grade level representative from each, is really get in the nitty gritty. What is the student doing and why? Um, you see a lot of strategies out there that say just apply check and check out to kids and just give them that blanket intervention. It should just be prescribed and away you go, right?
Mhm.
For us, we really had to stop that. And we had to say, that's not necessarily benefiting kids because A, it's not meeting their function. And then B, we're doing these interventions and now, for lack of a better word, wasting energy from our teachers who are trying to implement these interventions and spending a lot of time checking in with kids when why would we have them do that if the function isn't attention seeking? Right? Like, why would that
Yes.
make sense? And so we, as a team, stopped that. We really identified the function of the behavior for kids. And then what we really tried to do is utilize those grade level teammates to help disperse and communicate and educate our fellow team members on here's exactly what we talked about as a team. Here's the function that we identified based on the concerns that you've shared with us. And then here's exactly what the intervention is and all the resources and tools to do that. Now, we have not been able to expand the portfolio of interventions to the degree that I'd like. So that's, steps for the future. But my gosh, the number of teachers that saw success in intervening and seeing a change in behavior for kids was dramatic. We've gone from 17 calls a day down to maybe five. Um,
Wow.
I mean, just in a matter of months. And there's a lot to that, right? There's so many other factors too that play a role with it. But for me, um, getting teachers together from each grade level to have meaningful conversations about the child, what their specific need is, and what is a true intervention that is tailored to them, and then making sure the teacher has the support to intervene the right way. It makes sense when you put it on paper, but having the system to carry it out was the game changer for us.
So, something I'm hearing that you're saying is not only did you have a tiered system for students, you also had a tiered system for teachers. You
Hmm.
had tier one support. This is something that I teach in my own academy, and I have entire leadership and coaching teams make a tiered plan for teachers. Tier one, you set everyone down and level set be whatever your plan behavior management and trained people in the skills, basic skills, foundational skills of whatever they needed, right? That was like
Absolutely.
first step. Everyone's getting the same thing. You didn't assume. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes I see in schools. We assume people know and they're just not doing it. Or and we get stuck on our shoulds. Well, they should know. They've been a teacher for 10 years, right? And it's
You
like,
are, I'm shaking my head because I was just having this conversation with a principal the other day. We just assume people know how to do things and we can't. We can't. Sorry to interrupt, but we can.
yeah. And I think in addition to knowing how, knowing that it's expected, right? Knowing that this is the vision of our school, this is the direction our school is going, right? Again, it's not a mission and vision, a plaque on the wall. This is like the thing we're doing. This is the direction we're going, and we're going to train you. This is the thing we're talking about, right? What we put our attention on grows, right? So you
Mhm.
put your attention on being proactive about, with behavior. So I love that. So you did tier one. You're like, okay, everyone's level set on this foundational thing. Tier two intervention, you grab the small group of teachers, right? You had your
Hmm.
intervention team. You started pulling the grade level leads, right? Tier two,
Hmm.
intervention with teachers.
Yes, and not just any teachers, I'll say, like teachers who were motivated to be there and wanted to make a difference in the area of behavior, right? I didn't force anybody. I've been very lucky to have a positive school culture and hire great, great people,
Hmm.
but I'm not over there saying you need to be on tier two team. That's your check off committee for the year, right? That's the one you've got to sit on.
Hmm.
No, these people want to be there. They have great backgrounds. They're great teachers themselves,
Hmm.
and are in tune with kids, not just in their class, but others. And so that was another like reality check for myself as an AP was I have to lean on these people who I don't know everything, right? I can put people in the right position to help others be successful who do know more intently and more specifically that child. So that was a big key. Another thing that was really huge for us was establishing goals and making data super clear, especially for behavior. Our school's very, very nitty gritty when it comes to academics, right? We can pull up a child's kindergarten data all the way through fourth grade and before we send them on to the middle school, right? And show them their fall, winter, spring, their interventions all throughout the school year from beginning of their time at our school all the way to the end. And I thought to myself, well, why don't we do that for behavior? And so something that I've really gotten a good system down is identifying these risk scores for kids. And so we'll take academic attendance and behavior and kind of do a cross analysis and say, okay, well, this kid is flagging as a high risk kid in the area of behavior, but we also see that attendance is a big concern. So what kind of conversation can we have with our social worker or with our counselor or with our principal or whomever to make more connections at home? Oh, we noticed this student's really struggling in the area of academics. Well, before we place that student with a tier two intervention or even tier three, let's talk about their academic struggles. It seems like every time that child struggles during writing. So, how can we first talk with the teacher about accommodations during that writing time and focus there? before adding on all these extra layers and extra adults. I think we're so quick to just throw a label and feel good about it. And for teachers too, that's been something they've had to learn. Um, they've had to learn that they don't just send a kid to the tier two team and say, "Fix it for me." That's
Yeah.
not how it works. And so that's a bit of culture, reality checking. We have to be the gatekeepers of that culture. And so that's been a lot of the work of the team is helping them realize that's not how the system works, but also being very intentional and looking at consistent and regular data. And we're getting better at it, but for us, it was huge just to be able to see who are we actually struggling with. And another aspect of this too, Becca, is now making that visible to all staff. It doesn't just live in the team.
Yeah.
I share it every single month. We're lucky we have a 4-day school week, and so on Fridays when we have PD,
Uh-huh.
I share that out every single time. I'm showing monthly data. I'm showing growth from month to month to month of high risk kids, some risk kids, low risk kids, and it's amazing for them to see. And I'll add to that behavior calls too. So I'll show from last year to now where we are, and it's reassuring them. It's allowing them to see on the back end, wow, the work that I've been doing is actually helping. Even if I'm still struggling with a kid, I'm still invested in making this intervention happen. The final note I'll add on that, on the data side, is we were lucky we had a grant funded position last year. And that gal, who's amazing with behavior, but part of her role would be to plug in intervention data for teachers. I said, no, you are spending so much time on that. That needs to live with the teacher, whether they like it or not. I know that's harsh to hear. And as admin, we want to take off their plate. But for me and my perspective, they're running the intervention. It's in their classroom. And if they're plugging in and are in tune with the data,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
they can have that check with themselves and say, "Yeah, I'm doing this with fidelity because I'm tracking it and seeing it and believe I'm giving this my all
Yeah.
before coming to us and asking for more support."
Yeah. I love this. Okay. I have a couple things I want to touch on with this whole scenario, which is amazing. One question is, we talked about tier one, you did the whole group PD, tier two, you grab those small groups. What did you do for tier three support for teachers? How did you support individual teachers with individual needs, and who did the support? I'm curious if it was you or this lead teacher team.
It would be a variety. And
Hmm.
so it would really come down to the kid, right?
Okay.
For me, if it was just a generic kid who popped up as a new, kind of met that threshold for tier three, and it was someone that maybe it was so intense that we went past tier two and went to tier three immediately. I was usually taking that on and collaborating with the teacher, collaborating with the behavior interventionist. If it was someone that we had done the tier two process on, and I'm thinking of several kiddos right now that I know I can't name, but who kind of rose through the ranks of tier one, tier two, and then tier three. We had great information and great data on the kid already. And so
Yeah.
we would utilize those team leads, especially when, we had just finished a tier two meeting. And part of my protocol is I have those leads be the ones to communicate with their grade level and say, here are the specific kids we mentioned and our thoughts based on the data we're seeing, whether it's moving to tier three or staying at tier two or fading. But then they would have a say and go back and spend that time collaborating with the grade level teacher. And then I would put the ball in their court. If they wanted that tier three support, great. They could come ask for it, and then I would set up some collaborative planning time with them. If not, if they felt like, no, 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 I want to try some more things first before I ask for this, even better.
Yeah.
So yes, it would be a variety.
Okay. And then my next question is, when you looked at the data for behavior, right? There were clearly whole school trends. There
Mhm.
might be hotspot trends, like, oh, second grade is struggling, right? And then did you have trends like an individual teacher? Like, were there kind of like individual teacher trends? Like, ooh, like third grade generally is doing fine at this point, but this one teacher still struggling. Did you still have that as you were creating the change?
Absolutely. So part of that is you just easy graphing. So you look at the number of calls and I for assistant principals or principals that are looking to implement this system, if you haven't already, with your admin assistants or your secretaries, I would say create a behavior response call log. So every time there's a call to the office, they type it in and then they record it, and then now it's logged somewhere. It
Yeah.
makes it so accessible for me because otherwise it goes unchecked. And so at the end of the month or every so often, I look through that, and yes, there are trends with teachers. And so part of that becomes, what are the reasons why? Well, one teacher that was popping up, brand new teacher to our district, right? Still learning curriculum, still learning our system. So I set up coaching meetings every week with that teacher, not as a gotcha, but how can I support you? So I've gone in there many times, helping establish expectations, whisper coaching,
Yes.
collaboratively planning, and so that's been really an eye opener for me. As you're kind of making me reflect out loud, I wonder how I can put more of our teachers that are currently on that team into play with that. And there is some vulnerability, right? There has to be some agreed upon confidentiality to this too. Um, just like in a PLC, right?
Mhm.
We're all going to be very transparent,
Yeah.
but what's best for the kid at the end of the day? And
Yeah.
so you've got to be okay having those conversations. And for me, it also might just mean I'm going in and checking on that teacher and saying, is everything okay? Because I haven't seen you on my top five calls for a month in ever. So is everything okay? Maybe there's something personal going on that wasn't before. And so it just really, once you dig into the data, it gives you a lot of opportunities and gives you a lot of action. It kind of tells you like, oh, right there, that's where I need to go. Instead of just being a pawn to the walkie-talkie,
A
right?
pawn to the
Yeah.
walkie-talkie. Enslaved to the
Yes.
walkie-talkie.
Yes.
Um, so no, that's really great. And the last thing I just wanted to comment on was do you know the change adoption curve?
Mm-mm.
So this is a concept about how change works. It's one of the change models, and it kind of goes, it's this bell curve.
Yeah,
And
bell curve.
it's the concept of when we implement change, we actually start with a small committed group of people, and it grows momentum. And so and it's not like a little bit here, it's a little bit and then quite a bit more and then quite a bit more after that. And it sounds like as you're implementing this school-wide structure change, that's what you did. You actually grabbed a strong, committed group of teachers first, right? Worked with them and then started spreading it from there. Is that what happened?
Absolutely, it did. I was very transparent about the entire process too. I'm not sitting there acting like this is how I need you to do it. This is the exact way. No, no, no. We are collectively and collaboratively building the plane as we fly it.
Mhm.
And for us, we had to, right? If we have that many calls a day, there's no time,
Mhm.
right? We have to sit down and get something going. And so I'm very open with them about refining it and adjusting it and adapting it. But because these teachers have been with me now for a couple of years, and have stayed committed to the process, and they see the results too. So obviously there's some buy-in, even more so now, but because they have a role and because they generally care
Mhm.
about the teacher next door to them, they care about the school and the culture and the climate. We only have five to anywhere from 5 to 7 people attending this meeting at a time,
Mhm.
but our collective power has been tremendous. And if it was up to me, we'd meet every week, but we can't. And so we know that when we do meet, it is highly dedicated, focused work that will result in action. And and I've been part of systems where it's not that. Everyone's been part of the meeting where you just feel like that meeting should have been canceled. Could that not have been an email?
Yeah.
Or why am I here? What really is the purpose? And for us and our behavior team, it's so purposeful. And now we're just getting even more clarity for how to support our teachers.
And one of the things you said we kept, we have even more buy-in, and it sounds like you've actually gone beyond buy-in and you have engagement or even ownership. In a previous episode, I talked about that I have this brilliant colleague and friend, and he made this teacher engagement continuum. And
Hmm.
it goes from anything from like someone that takes down the boat to to ownership and commitment, I think is the highest, right? And
Hmm.
buy-in's kind of in the middle. Buy-in's like our minimum. And it's funny because we use that term a lot because we're in a context of compliance culture. And if we're
Hmm.
in a I could go on and on about this, but if we're in a
I know.
context of compliance and we have to get people to buy in, but you stepped out of that context, involved people in decision making, right?
Hmm.
And once we do that, we go beyond buy-in the moment we involve people in those decisions. So I really hear like ownership, that the teachers at your school had ownership over this.
It's funny you mentioned the word ownership, Becca. So our rubric, oh, I'm so sorry. One of our timers is going off. So it's funny you mentioned ownership, Becca, because our school rubric, how we evaluate and assess teachers, it goes from 1 through 5. It's NIET. So level one, total teacher ownership, and then level five, complete student ownership, right? And so for us, that's kind of what we talk about constantly is how do we get students to own the learning? Well, for us as administrators, how do we get teachers to own the learning?
Yeah.
So for me, when I was thinking about how do I expand understanding behavior just beyond, my office and Mr. Vaughn's office, the principal, I really thought about our professional development opportunities and not making it about sitting and getting in a presentation, but problem solving. And so something that I took an ABC kind of concept, antecedent behavior consequence, and that took about 3 or 4 different sessions worth of PD, but every single time I first started with teachers celebrating positive wins through a behavioral lens, expectations lens with kids. I would always start there with the positive, but then we would talk about antecedent. Let's better understand the functions and the reasons why that one or two kiddos in your class are struggling as of late. Okay. Now we're going to better understand what the behavior is that they're showing. And now we're going to understand the consequences of the behavior. What is the immediate response that you are demonstrating or following up with? Are you jumping to the phone to call, or are you getting on their level, talking through them, using a blueprint conversation, um, right? Getting them to better understand strategies for how to respond. And we've done that consistently. So I would have them write down on a little index card, okay? ABC, your student, right? Write the student's name, write the ABCs for them, and then on the back, I want you to write how are you going to modify or adapt the consequences or proactively adapt so that the antecedents are extinguished and removed so
Yeah.
that way the behavior goes away. And then sticking with it, right? Not reinventing the wheel. This is the work that we want to continue doing. And obviously it helps when you attach that learning to positive behavior data school wide. And so now I feel like we're building competence, we're building confidence, and we're still not where we want to be. Obviously, there's always room to grow, but as far as initial buy-in with owning that this is my student, I have a lot of autonomy and control to change this. It's been really empowering for our teachers.
Yeah, this is amazing. Well, time has flown. But this is so great. Thank you so much for sharing this super concrete example of how you have impacted behavior at your school. And I hope the listeners listening like are like taking notes. If you're driving, be safe. But and it's just this was really great. Thank you so much. I know I've just been reminded of really important ways of thinking about the system of the school, right? So if you're
Mhm.
going to leave everyone listening with one next step, like what's if their school is struggling with behavior, what would
Mhm.
be one action step they could walk away from this episode?
Mhm. Oh, just one, Becca. You're gonna do that.
Oh
Ah,
no.
there's so many. Well, first, I would say if you're that leader in your mind, decide that it's doable. For
Mhm.
me, I had to decide in my head that this is possible. I can change this. I can fix this. But I had to decide what's my theory of action, right? So believe that it's possible. Decide what your theory of action is going to be, and take that action. I know I cheated. I know that was more than one thing, but that's what
I
I would
love
say.
it. I love it. And that's so funny. You mirrored, so ownership mindset is part of my framework. And ownership mindset has 3 steps. Take the reins, believe it's possible, own the outcome. And I'm like, yes, this is it in real life.
It's possible, Becca. Ownership mindset.
Yes.
I love it.
And so if people want to know more about you, you have a podcast. I'm going to be on your podcast soon. So let everyone know, where can they find out more about you or follow you?
Yeah, so I host a podcast called the Ed Essentials Podcast, where education meets leadership. It's basically for folks that are listening to this conversation as well. If you're an aspiring administrator or currently serving associate principal or principal, or you're just interested in learning more about school leadership, that's the show for you. You can find my website at it's just edessentials.net. I'm pretty active on Instagram and Facebook, so if you just search at Ed Essentials or Hunter Flesh, I will pop up. I guarantee there's not that many people named Hunter Flesh out there, but I would love to connect with you. I'm all about the messaging, so if you want to message me, your current situation and see how I can help, I would love to be of service to you.
I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Becca. It's been an honor.